I'm convinced that microbes are essential to our existence. And I don't just mean that in a sort of, yeah, they help your gut microbiome. It's like, no, they literally are the internet of life. The infection of viruses and bacteria and every other bacteriophage and every other form of microbe that we know about and don't know about, they are all essential to the transmission of behavior, instinct, memory. All these sorts of things happen in such a way that we just don't understand.
Hello and welcome back to Collapse Life. I'm your host, Zahra Sethna. I want to welcome those of you who are new to the channel. It's so nice to have you with us. And of course, a warm welcome back to our loyal viewers. Before we dive in today, please take a second to hit those like and subscribe buttons. That really helps us a lot. Today, we're talking about something that's both ancient and strangely radical: milk, specifically raw milk. Our guest is Forrest Maready, author, independent researcher, and longtime questioner of official narratives. His new book is The Germ in the Dairy Pail, and it tackles the war against raw milk. But it's not just about dairy, it's about sovereignty, choice, and a creeping biosecurity state that says trust us while they raid farms, ban natural foods, and sell us ultra processed, lab grown alternatives, all in the name of safety. So, welcome to Collapse Life, Forest.
Hey, Zara, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much. You are an incredibly prolific writer. And not only that, you just launched two new books on the same day. So, congratulations for that. That's quite a feat.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure if congratulations is in order, but I'm dumb enough to try it. So at
Well,
least
we're
there's that.
glad you did. And the book, one of those two, is the one that we're here to talk about today. So, first of all, I mean, your work has often pushed readers to question official versions of events. And so, this new book about raw milk is kind of a continuation of that thread. What was it about milk specifically, of all things, that made you feel like this was a hidden history that need to be told?
Well, that's a good question. My One of my most popular books is about polio, the moth and the iron lung, and that was a interesting story that I, like a lot of people, started researching and discovered there was a lot there that hadn't been told, and it got me interested enough to go down the rabbit hole far enough to come up with enough research that I felt like it was worth a book, and so I did. Milk had always interested me in that I grew up, like everyone, believing that pasteurized milk was the salvation of what was a very dangerous substance. And like the polio story, we were told that science saved the day. It saved humankind from certain destruction from what was a formerly innocuous substance. So I started seeing some parallels in the milk story with the polio story, in that polio was a formerly innocuous virus that never paralyzed. And some reason in the late 1800s, it began paralyzing children for reasons unknown, uh, for reasons science seemed to not be that interested in figuring out. So, in that same way, I started seeing some parallels that milk apparently was safe to drink at some point, and for some reason became unsafe to drink. And then science, of course, to the rescue, as the story goes, without having much curiosity about what made it dangerous in the first place. So, once I saw those parallels, I started going down the rabbit hole, as they say, and discovered a wild story that I had seen bits and pieces of in some of my research, but there was a lot there that I hadn't seen anywhere. So I felt like let's have a crack at it and see if there's a book there. And after a few months of researching and kind of noodling about, I figured out that, hey, I think there's actually a book worth telling here, a story worth telling, I should say.
So I think it would be important then to just go right into what was that change? Was it just a change in narrative that something that we used to drink has now become dangerous, or was there actually a biological change that happened?
Yeah, it was a sequence of events. If you want to buckle up for a moment,
Yeah.
I'll kind of fly through them at light speed, and then you can stop me at any moment if you want some more detail. Uh, but just to summarize, 50,000 foot view: unpasteurized raw milk is necessary for every mammal on the planet to survive infancy. Okay, just keep that under your head, under your hat for a moment. Raw, unpasteurized milk is necessary for every mammal on the planet since the beginning of all time to survive infancy. Okay, humans have drank the milk of other animals for all time, as far as we know. Cows are very popular in Western cultures, goats are very popular in others. There's all sorts of animals that humans drink the milk of besides their mothers. Um, so, for some reason, in the 1800s, raw, unpasteurized milk from cows started to become dangerous. And this was actually something that was happening. This wasn't in our imagination. It was becoming dangerous. And the question is, what happened? What changed to make this formerly innocuous substance, this formerly healthy, nutritious substance, dangerous? And one of the first things I recognized as I started doing the research was we started changing the way cows were raised. And up until the early 1800s, this was a very small time operation. Dairy farms were in the hundreds of thousands across any given country because any farmer may have a few cows. They had some pasture and grass, and the cows would eat, and they would calve in the spring, and throughout the summer, they would feed their calves, and they would be producing a lot of milk because there's a lot of grass growing. And humans would enjoy milk for a few months. And then as fall and winter came, they'd wean the calf, and the milk would stop being so in abundance. And then humans would kind of take a break. And then the whole cycle would begin again the next year. So people started farming cows in such a way they could get the milk all year round.
Mm.
And without enough feed to go year round, they had to come up with a system to preserve the feed. And this came in the form of silos. And silos were a really interesting phenomenon in that they allowed for the fermentation of grass in such a way that it didn't spoil. But the problem is the health of the cows suffered for it, and the quality of the milk began to suffer at the same time. In addition to that, the nature of the manure of the cows changed in such a way that it made keeping them clean, it made keeping the stables in which they slept and the dairy parlors in which they were milked, it made keeping them clean nearly impossible. At
Mm.
that time, germ theory, the notion of microbes that were so small we couldn't see them, didn't exist. So cleanliness was not something at the top of a farmer's mind. It was milk, and they'd put it in a bucket, and never mind what else got in the milk. So these sorts of things began to accumulate. They started feeding the cows differently. They started feeding them corn instead
Mm.
of grass because farmers realized that they could make more money off their pastures growing corn. And suddenly the nutritional profile of what the cows ate changed. And so obviously, so too did the milk they produced. And then finally, the real big sort of nail in the coffin of healthy, raw, unpasteurized milk was in the form of what they called swill milk, which is there were a lot of distilleries that came into production in the 1800s, mainly through the War of 1812, which was established. This is very nerdy history here, but it
Mm.
established a blockade around the United States, and we used to get all our rum from Cuba, and it stopped coming in. So Americans started figuring out ways to produce their own whiskey and rum and these sorts of alcoholic spirits. And so they had a lot of leftover, what they called mash or swill, which was the leftover matter that they had used to make their alcohol from. And they started realizing that the cows reluctantly would eat it. So these distilleries actually started making stables next to their distilleries so that the cows could eat the waste of the distilleries and they got free milk as far as they were concerned. And children started getting sick and dying from this. And I can't emphasize to you enough how horrible this period of history was because there were thousands of infants that would die every summer from this milk, tens
Mm.
of thousands. Um, I think in 1 year alone, they estimated over 20,000 infants died of intestinal illnesses related to corrupted milk.
Wow.
So, polio, which is everyone thinks of as the worst disease to ever befall humankind, never killed that many children um, ever total, in a aggregate count
Wow.
from 19 whatever you want to consider 1894 or 1906 or something through the 1960s. when DDT, the pesticide, was finally phased out, I don't think it killed that many infants cumulatively. So in 1 year, this corrupted milk could kill more infants than polio ever did. And it's something most people don't know about. I certainly didn't realize it was that bad of a problem. So you can imagine, I'm about to wrap it up here. You can imagine that it was a concern because the milk was most definitely tainted. It was most definitely causing illness and death. It was wrecking the health of the mothers who drank it. And coincidentally, it was wrecking the breast milk that these mothers were giving to their children in such a way that it gave rise to formula. Infant formula
Wow.
became a new product that was deemed necessary because the mother's breast milk was so inferior that the children were getting sick from that. So it was a massive problem created by industrial food production, the need for more efficient, more plentiful, more year-round milk without any sort of scientific knowledge as to what sorts of side effects might be occurring. So eventually, from through the 1800s, what was once the most nutritious beverage on the planet, food, if you want to call it that, became probably the most dangerous thing any baby could possibly consume. And with that came the desire for a solution.
Right.
And that's how we get to pasteurization and all the other sorts of nincompoop stuff we've done to it.
Was the shift in agricultural practice something that was uniquely American at that time? Was this also happening, say, in Europe around the same period?
The silos were not. Silos were a European invention and made their way to the United States. The distillery slop, the swill milk, was most definitely American initially. I believe other countries started following suit. Monoculture farming, which is focusing on one product, which was corn, was most definitely a worldwide phenomenon as certain
Mm,
cultures began realizing the efficiency gains to be had by growing one crop, which was almost always corn. So um, it was definitely more pronounced in the United States than anywhere I've read, and that's the country I'm from. So I tend to focus my research on that because it's the but material is readily available.
mhm.
So I can't totally speak to the prevalence of other countries, other than I know that silos were a global phenomenon. I know that monoculture farming was a phenomenon. I'm not sure about the distilleries and the swill milk scandals of the 1850s, 60s, 70s, and so on. Um, but it was definitely a problem,
Mhm.
and the solution was known throughout the world because the solution was to heat the milk. And this actually started in France and other countries, Spain, when they realized that they could make the wine less problematic. They would heat certain wines, and they realized it killed something in them that was causing disease. Again, they didn't totally understand the notion of microbes at the time,
Right.
but they did understand that it made it safer to drink
Mhm.
with heat. So before Louis Pasteur came on the scene, people were heating milk because of what they had been doing with wine. There were mothers who were heating milk as a precaution because they started to realize that their children would get less sick from the milk as long as they heated it beforehand. So we call this process pasteurization now after Louis Pasteur, but he didn't invent it, and he certainly didn't perfect it, but he just through marketing and blind luck became the name that we associate with it.
Mhm.
But pasteurization was a global phenomenon. It made its way around the world um, in I'll say more advanced civilizations that had the industrial capacity to ruin their food.
Right. So we had a legitimate problem, a pretty simple solution, heat the product before consuming it.
Yes.
How did we get from that to this contentious, politicized debate that continues 150 years later?
Yeah, it's a horrible story. You see this often in nearly any scientific advance or movement. In that, I say this often: there's no rewind button. Anytime science inadvertently creates a problem, which is usually in an attempt to solve a problem, they may solve a problem somewhat, but inevitably create another problem in some other form. It's like playing whack-a-mole. And sometimes that problem is not readily visible because it's disseminated among a wider population. So, what was once an acute illness among a few people and easily seen may become a more innocuous illness among millions of people. And then it's harder to blame the problem on anything in particular because it's so widespread and maybe more trivial than it once was. Sometimes science defers the problem to later, which is the case with antibiotics. We are certainly deferring um, a ginormous problem, which is acute illness from bacterial infections that could certainly kill us, and we save lives with antibiotics. But everyone knows we're deferring the problem to humans that come after us who are going to have to deal with antibiotic resistance at a level that we probably can't even dream of today.
Of course.
So there is no rewind button in science. It is always forge ahead, go to the next solution rather than taking a moment to ponder what might have caused the problem in the first place, hitting the rewind button and saying, perhaps this never ending search for efficiency and the resulting industrialization of food may not be worth the cost. Perhaps we should go back to pasture raised, grass fed cows for our milk. The reaction is always to move forward and to come up with new solutions. Scientists are not very good at admitting fault or taking blame for anything they've done. And like all things, I mean, I suppose you could say that's a human condition. Um, but the more that's at stake with your solution, and the more people that are inadvertently injured by it or hurt by it, the less likely anyone's going to fess up to, hey, we might have made a mistake here. This is our problem. We should have never done this. So as time went on in the 1800s, uh, pasteurized milk created a new problem, rickets. Now, rickets is where you have bone deformities because you're not getting enough vitamin D.
Hmm.
And you've probably seen children whose legs are not straight. They kind of bow outward. That's the typical rickets profile. And this started becoming a real problem in America, which was considered, a fairly healthy first world country. And they discovered that pasteurization was destroying vitamin D in the milk. And children had done fine drinking their mother's milk or cow milk for hundreds of years, and suddenly rickets became a problem. And it was because of pasteurization.
Hmm.
So, what was the answer to that? Well, science to the rescue, of course, and it was in the form of fortification. So, science came up with a solution, which is we're going to add vitamin D into the milk so that it's healthy again. And they actually marketed this as a victory,
Hmm.
technology and science to the rescue. We know why children are having rickets, and it's because they're not getting enough vitamin D. Now, never mind, the problem was the milk had plenty of vitamin D before they pasteurized it. But they framed it as if they were the hero to a problem that nature had created in some, undiscovered way.
Right. I
So fortification became the first of a series of band-aids on what was formerly a perfectly healthy substance.
That's perfect. That's exactly where I wanted to go next, because I think there would be a lot of people listening to this might be just ready to tune out by saying, "So what's the big deal?" So it used to be dangerous. Now we have pasteurization. It doesn't make kids die anymore. Let's just move on. Why are we still talking about this? But there's a lot more that gets lost in the pasteurization process that takes raw milk to another level, right? So talk about some of the things that are beneficial about raw milk that we are now no longer allowed to partake in.
Yeah, I'm sure your listeners have probably heard some of the accounts of the relationship between a breastfeeding mother and her child, and how the child may get sick. And the mother's body recognizes this and fine tunes her milk so that it has antibodies to help the child through their sickness. Okay, this is a miracle of life that's just so unbelievably insane. It's hard to believe that it actually happens, but it does. So people will accept that as a phenomenon. They say, okay, I accept it. This sounds too crazy to be true, but I'll accept it. It appears as though the same thing in a way happens with humans and animals they get milk from.
Mm.
And it's not, of course, that intimate, Uh, but there is a symbiotic relationship that goes on between humans and the animals that provide food for them. Now there's the notion of um, if you eat honey from the field down the road, the honey will provide antibodies for you to not have pollen allergies from bees down the road.
Right.
Okay. It's this very intimate system of nature that works fairly perfectly. Nowadays, we drink milk from 1,000 cows that's gathered in the same vat, and they might live 700 miles away from us. And so some of the health benefits that might come from this symbiotic relationship are gone and missing. Regardless, it appears as though humans have developed a symbiotic relationship with animal milk in such a way that it provides the canvas of microbiology that our body needs to have a healthy gut. And people sort of throw around this term wantonly, but it's a real thing. It really is. Your body is full of more foreign microbes than human microbes. This is a really hard thing for people to accept, that you are more not yourself than you are yourself. And you have more microbes living in you and on you than you do human microbes. And they are an integral part of your health. They are what allows you to eat nearly any food on the planet and survive and not have allergic reaction to it. And raw, unpasteurized milk provides the palette of microbiological critters that your body can pick and choose from and say, "Ooh, I want more of this. Ooh, I don't like this. I don't want this. But hey, I'll use this and I'll combine it with this, and I can develop immunity to this problem and this problem, and I can more effectively metabolize certain vitamins with these combinations." And it's essentially a spectrum of color that your body can use to paint a picture of perfect health with.
Right.
And when you nuke everything into water, which is essentially what modern milk is, it's pasteurized white water with vitamin D added in a laboratory. You're not giving your body anything to work with, right? It's
Mhm.
just sort of like, yeah, it's not going to hurt you. It's probably not going to give you cancer, but you're missing out on all the raw material your body needs in its factory to create health. It really struggles without that population. Now, people will take probiotics, they will take vitamins, and these things, they're just not as good. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to diss on them. I mean, sure, they work and they're great, but they're not live cultured bacteria that you want. And milk, raw unpasteurized milk, provides in such a way that unpasteurized milk will just never do. It just can't give you the health benefits of raw unpasteurized milk.
And raw milk advocates would say it is crazy that you can legally buy Doritos or alcohol or cigarettes or be prescribed opioids that have tons of side effects, but raw milk is just too dangerous. So um, there's a policy aspect to this that is hard for us to overcome, um, where some bureaucrat somewhere or some nameless, faceless agency gets to define what's too dangerous for me to put in my body. Um, Talk a little bit about that aspect of it.
Well, unfortunately, the modern age is characterized by a culture of safety, a culture of the belief that the avoidance of all danger will lead to a full life. Now, we see this, of course, in the natural health circles under the belief that the avoidance of sickness is key to health. And we all know this is completely wrong. You would never say the avoidance of exercise is necessary to physical fitness. We know that exercise is necessary for physical fitness. In that same way, it shouldn't be too much of a stretch for someone to agree to the fact that we know that sickness is necessary for health. Your body benefits from suffering. You can
Mhm.
go to the gym and sweat, and your muscles are sore the next day and you're tired, and you benefit from that. It's an investment in the future. And in that same way, sickness is a investment in the future. Your body benefits from sickness. and generates antibodies. It generates immunity. It can pass that immunity on to other people around you. Everyone benefits from sickness here and there. As I mentioned, our culture is one of the avoidance of suffering, the avoidance of danger. We believe that we can have our cake and eat it too. So, if pasteurizing milk most definitely nukes many of the bacteria in it, not all of them, but many of them, and the milk appears safer and people aren't getting sick or E. coli or whatever, then that's considered a win. The health benefits of doing this, as they're lost, are not so apparent. They're not so easy to point to and say, hey, look, um, 50 years later, now that everyone's drinking pasteurized milk, we have gluten allergy that never existed before. Now, who's going to fund that research to say gluten allergy may have something to do with the fact that we don't drink raw milk anymore? Who's going to fund that? Who's going to benefit from that? Unfortunately, no one will. There's no one willing to put up the tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars to fund that research because you can't profit from that. Maybe bread makers could profit from selling their old school gluten bread, but I'm sure they're making more money on the gluten-free bread if the cost at the store is any indication.
Right.
So they may like the fact that people are have gluten issues. So I don't want to devolve everything down to profit because that's sort of an easy way out. I think that there are many people in the world with nefarious purposes who are driven by much more than just more money.
Mhm.
And but that is a big cause. Is there is no money in natural food. You can't patent it, you can't trademark it, you can't copyright it, you can't monopolize it. Anyone can have raw milk in their backyard with a cow and or a goat or whatever animal, and enough pasture or grass or feed for them, and there is zero money to be made by any industrialization on that. So things tend toward safer alternatives because that is the mindset of our world, is that we can have our cake and eat it too, and they tend toward that. They tend toward industrial processes which are profitable, and selling raw unpasteurized milk doesn't have the same ability to be profited from by larger players in such a way that the cottage industry would. So there's a couple of issues at play. Certainly, there is ignorance. Certainly, there is pride and hubris from having been wrong about something. That's probably one of the single biggest factors. Is anyone that staked their career on saying that raw milk was dangerous is probably not going to change their mind publicly, at least, because it's too humiliating. So that's something I've always tried to do. My wife and I, in our studies and anything we write about or talk about, is to say, we will freely admit when are wrong. We are going to hold ourselves to that we may be wrong about some of the things we're saying, and we will try and fess up if we are. So, yeah, there's a couple factors at play: power, money, prestige, pride, hubris. Um, but it's a shame because the autonomy of human beings is increased through natural food and it's decreased through industrialized food. There's the notion that humans once knew how to make food for themselves feels so foreign in this modern age that I do worry quite a bit about um, the future food supply. In that most humans aren't aren't aware of how to make their own food. There are children who have no idea that hamburgers come from cows. They can't believe that that's actually a thing, and this is not a joke. I mean, they really don't understand where our food comes from. So in times of scarcity or global supply chain problems, I worry that humans don't know how to make food, and we certainly don't have the land to do it right now in the way that our industrial farming has wrecked much of the land.
Absolutely. It's we completely agree, and it's sort of a terrifying prospect how far we've come away from where a lot of people were just a few generations ago. There a lot of people of our generation, our grandparents, had backyard gardens or perhaps had farms, and we've come so far from that now that children, um, people younger than us, don't have no idea, or would be horrified if they went to a farm and smelled manure and would just think,
Yeah.
"Ooh, that's so gross." So there's an actual fear, like a physical fear of filth and um, disease and all of that stuff that we has become so entrenched. But I think, as you say, that especially when it comes to raw milk, there seems to be something more going on. I think it's all of
Mm,
the things that you just described, but it's such a third rail. It's a bit mind-boggling when you think about how little we're allowed to talk about this or choose. I mean, people have found all sorts of creative ways to get around being able to access raw milk through the cottage trades, as you said. But even those are highly um, penalized when people are caught, moving across a state border or
mm,
um, selling even through private membership clubs, things like that. It just, it has to be done in a way as though you're doing something highly, highly illegal. Even if neighbors who have farms share products, I have milk, you have fruit, I leave it on your doorstep. That's something that they do very nervously because
mhm.
they could be caught and told on and have big licensing problems. So it just there's definitely something else going on, and I don't. I want to kind of see if we can rattle that cage a little bit to understand why raw milk, of all things. I mean, the decisions were made 150 years ago, so the people who chose to move into that industrial setting are long gone. So the hubris part of it, it's like the science is fairly kind of it's settled in the sense that it's not modern day scientists today
Mhm.
who decided that. It's just something that I can't quite figure out, and that's why I'm so happy to have this conversation with you to just ask some of these questions.
Yeah, I mean, I assume you're sort of saying, let's put on our conspiracy theory hats here. Is there
Yeah.
something beyond? Well, I think um, there are there are a few other things. Um, Milk is a primordial, primal food. It is the first thing any infant consumes,
Mhm.
um, and this is sort of a similar um, capture that vaccines do, and that people are concerned for their children more at they're concerned for their infants and their
Mhm.
toddlers more at that stage of their life than any other stage. So they're more concerned about disease, they're more concerned about nutrition, and these two things provide a lot of leverage that you will never get in a human's life ever again.
Right.
And I mean, marketers know this. I used to work in advertising, and if you want a product that you can sell a lot of, it's do something while the woman is pregnant and about to give birth. Find them something that they might worry about, or they want for their child, or that grandparents want to buy for their grandchildren. This is a very intense moment in someone's life when you are about to bring new life into the world. And it gives them a lot of leverage. It gives them a lot of power. Anyone who has any um, notion or design upon control, uh, new life in the form of infants and toddlers and children gives them all sorts of leverage that they'll never get again. So I think just by human nature, milk becomes a powerful tool of
Mm.
control in that it is for these children that are at their most vulnerable stage in their life and need the most nutrition, or as in the case of the vaccine industry, the notion that they are most prone to disease and death uh, from certain infections, which is not true. But anyway, it is
Yeah.
they have successfully managed this narrative in such a way that people do feel vulnerable,
Yeah.
and they are concerned about bacteria and infection. Um, if I may just say one more thing, germophobia essentially is a phenomenon that arose to prominence at the same time of the discovery of germs. From the minute we understood that there were little critters in our water and our food, we became terrified of the critters in our water and food. And, that saying ignorance is bliss, we probably would have been better off not knowing. Now people will say, hey, well, what about cholera and the ghost map book and all these stories of people dying from infection and they didn't realize they needed to clean the water. Well, this was really a modern problem of sanitation and sewage and overcrowding. And, you live out in the middle of nowhere and you're drinking water from creeks and wells. It just really was very rarely a problem. Um, so yeah, I think the vulnerability of those people affected by it is definitely makes milk a prime target for it.
Mhm.
It came to prominence at a time when germophobia was just coming about, and that gave people all kinds of leverage because they had new tools through which to scare people. And in fact, that exists to this day. I still see people going. I saw one yesterday, a guy on a bicycle outside wearing a mask, and people are legitimately terrified
Yeah.
of microbes. And the other book I wrote, The Reason We Kiss, talks about this, but I'm convinced that microbes are essential to our existence. And I don't just mean that in a sort of, yeah, they help your gut microbiome. It's like, no, they literally are the internet of life. The infection of viruses and bacteria and every other bacteriophage and every other form of microbe that we know about and don't know about, they are all essential to the transmission of behavior, instinct, memory. All these sorts of things happen in such a way that we just don't understand. So, without getting into the weeds on that, the notion that microbes are not our friends is completely false.
Right.
Now, there are certainly infections that can harm you if you're not in a state of optimal health, or if they break through the skin, like through a puncture of an animal bite or something. Yeah, of course, there's
Mhm.
problems. Not
Mhm.
everything's perfect. There is danger in the world, though. But humans in general are very healthy creatures when freely exposed to microbes. We're supposed to be exposed to them.
Right.
So the vulnerability of children, the leverage that the germophobia brought is very powerful, and that brings us to modern day. Like, how are we still here? How are people enacting even more egregious laws against it? I live in North Carolina, where our Secretary of Agriculture is actively trying to ban even herd share programs, which is where you sort of physically own a cow in such a way that you can get raw milk legally. He's
Right.
trying to actively ban raw milk sold for pet consumption, which is often, consumed by all sorts of animals.
Right.
And liability is a big concern. There's dairy farms that can't get liability insurance. Through aggressive lobbying at the government levels, they won't provide a backstop for insurance companies to provide liability to dairy farms. So if somebody drinks their milk and gets an infection and sues them, they have zero insurance for it.
Mhm.
So is there a global cabal, pushing the raw milk buttons in their secret lair, trying to make humankind unhealthy and depopulate the earth? Maybe, but they don't have to. It's not even necessary. There are so many things working against us that I don't
Yeah.
even think it's necessary for a conspiracy to take place, for all this stuff to happen. It's just sitting there ripe for the taking because of all these things I just mentioned.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's so interesting too how raw milk and vaccine questioning kind of travel down the same road because essentially we should live in a world where we're allowed to take that responsibility on and we're allowed to make choices for ourselves and for our families and for our pets. If I want my cat to be able to drink raw milk, I should be able to have that option. And it seems like all of those options are being stripped away. So this is where um, you do start to wonder about that lever of control and why are we first of all why are we not allowed to question science and that's the sort of overarching question and I think that pins a lot of your work together a lot of the things that you've researched kind of fall under that and
Mm.
then when you do start to question it and say all right this is a choice that I want to make for my body I would like to drink raw milk or I would like to not take that pharmaceutical option those choices are now being weaponized. They're being made illegal. When it comes to infectious diseases and having children in groups in schools, you can almost understand the argument that not protecting one child could put other children at risk. Although that's a whole other very questionable topic that we maybe can talk about another time. But milk, if my child doesn't drink pasteurized milk and then goes to school, there's no risk to other children. It again just puts me back in this, like, what is going on with this topic? Why raw milk of all things? But yeah, I just
It's definitely, they've got lots of leverage, and the notion that human beings would not have the freedom to choose what food they ate or drank would have been completely unimaginable to those people who started our country 250 years ago. A few years ago, I started a proposed constitutional amendment for medical freedom, which was a similar thing, which was, hey, we actually need protection um, that gives human beings the freedom to refuse or accept certain medical treatments if they so choose. And again, this is a modern problem. The notion that any government would have a say so in what I can put in my body,
Mhm.
um, particularly food or medicine, um, is just so foreign and so antithetical to any notion of freedom or liberty that it's just laughable that they can try and pass these laws under the guise of safety. Um, there's certain, you could get into, yeah, there's certain drugs that people get addicted to and they abuse. And should the government have something to say about it? Yeah, maybe so. Maybe, humans are dumb. We can't, we're not, uh, perfect scenario. Yeah, everybody would not be dumb. And I don't know, some people can't help themselves. So maybe fentanyl shouldn't be available at your local drugstore. Otherwise, people would just be dying by the hundreds of thousands. But for food, for raw milk, it's just such a laughable substance that um, to think that they have gone to extremes to raid farms in the middle of the night, Amish farmers, um, raid them to destroy their farm in such a way they can't, ever farm again. And it's just a horrible situation that this has become standard practice. Now, fortunately, things are turning. COVID was a blessing in disguise for a lot of things, in that people started waking up to a little bit of bodily autonomy. People started getting a little ill that they were being locked down and they were told they had to wear masks and stay 6 feet from people. And then when they realized these instructions were just pulled out of thin air, they got even more angry. And then, of course, with the revelation that the COVID vaccine uh, did nothing to stop the spread of the virus, people got really ill about that. And all the other COVID vaccine related discoveries made people very curious about what they were being told. So that trickle down, we're starting to see it. I
Mhm.
think you're seeing it in the form of people like Bobby Kennedy getting in as the HHS secretary. And he's readily, openly questioning things that would have never been discussed at that level of the government. Now, people are certainly frustrated that he's not doing it fast enough or aggressively enough, but it's a huge, huge step in the right direction, no matter where you sit. There are all kinds of discussions being had about this topic that are encouraging. And I certainly, I know for a fact that Bobby Kennedy is aware of the raw milk scandal, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it become a topic of conversation at the highest levels of our government soon. So I'm crossing my fingers on that. I don't know that it's going to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him start bringing it up because it is coming. People are becoming more health conscious. They're starting to realize how much industrialized food has wrecked their nutrition. And they're becoming a little more skeptical of what the mainstream narratives are regarding our health. So I expect that this conversation will be one day a curious, horrible stretch of his human history, and will be regarded, with a confused look on children's faces as they realize that we were forbidden from drinking what every mammal on the planet has to survive infancy.
I hope that's true. I do agree. I think that there are more conversations happening now than there were before, not just about raw milk, but about all these things because they come back to freedom of choice. And I think, as you've said, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, what we're allowed to eat is kind of one of the last frontiers of freedom, and we should be able to choose. And if I want to eat hamburgers and Doritos, I should have that choice. But if I don't, I should also have the opposite choice. So for anyone who's listening, who's now sort of starting to wake up to this and maybe wanting to take a stand, obviously reading your book is a good first step. But what else would you suggest in terms of steps that people can take to just take a stand for what they believe in
Yeah,
terms
I
of food?
you can't go wrong with the Weston Price Foundation. They're a really great resource for raw milk. I think their website is realmilk.com, that they put up with all sorts of real resources in terms of activism, or just supporting your local farmer who does this. That's a big one. Um, I think the more people find out about it, and the more anecdotal stories of people's health improving, that's something we didn't mention, but I certainly have seen it in my family's life, an improvement in health from drinking raw milk, and this is for people who couldn't drink regular dairy at all.
Hmm.
And so there is hope for people who have a lot of gastrointestinal related illnesses, um, that raw unpasteurized milk can actually restore their health in a way that no medicine can. And again, there are a lot of people who just can't believe this is true. It feels too good to be true, but it happens constantly. I mean, it happens every day. I hear stories of this. So, yeah, get to know your local farmers. Go to your if there's a co-op near you, if there's a farmer's market near you, ask around. These are good people. They are small farmers. They can't get liability insurance. They are trying to do the right thing. Support them all you can. These are really good people who are most likely sacrificing a lot to try and provide a healthy alternative to industrialized foods. So you don't have to, write your senator or go sit in the halls of Congress, screaming at people with signs. You don't have to do any of that. Just supporting your local farmers is a huge step in growing the movement. So, yeah, I'd recommend anybody go to those websites and figure out a better way to get involved.
That's fantastic. Any final thoughts or any things that you'd like to say that I didn't ask?
No, I just rehash the fact that for your listeners to keep in mind that every mammal on the planet has to drink raw unpasteurized milk to survive infancy. It is a normal, expected course of action that every mammal on the planet does. There is nothing unnatural about raw unpasteurized milk at all. It is a completely healthy, nutritious food or beverage that no one should monkey with in a lab. It is necessary for our health. And I think we're probably going to have to go back to it to restore a lot of the health we've lost ever since we stopped drinking it.
Hmm. Absolutely. Remind people how they can find you, find your writing, buy your book, and support you.
Yeah. My books are available on Amazon print, digital, or audiobook. Some people don't like to buy through Amazon. You can buy through my personal website, forrestmaready.com. There's a store link on there, and you can get them through there. I ship them out myself and try to sign every copy. Um, but those are really the two. I'm fairly active on Twitter. I don't use the other socials, and I really don't use Twitter much at all. I'm trying to practice a digitalization of my life and
Yes.
restore some of the humanity that we once had through local relationships and less digital online relationships. But I'm happy to be here and talking to you, of course. But anyway, um, yeah, the website, Amazon are fine. And yeah, lots of interesting books on there. But I appreciate you having me on. This has been a really interesting discussion.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us. I know you don't do too many of these, so it's an honor to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Folks, if this conversation challenged a belief, confirmed a suspicion, or just gave you a clearer view of the madness that's going on, please share it far and wide. Someone you know probably still thinks this is just about milk. For more content like this, head over to collapselife.com. You'll find our latest posts, our podcasts, and tools to help you think clearly in chaotic times. At this point in the program, we used to suggest buying us a coffee, and you can certainly still do that. But if our work truly resonates, please consider becoming a paid subscriber. You'll notice we don't shill for VPNs or satellite phones, and we certainly don't receive much love from the algorithms. So your direct support of our channel helps us call out the absurd and spotlight what still makes us human. Monthly subscriptions are $8. That's one fancy latte at those luxury coffee bars. We'll be back next week with more. And until then, thank you so much for being here. And remember, keep your chin up. It's only collapse. See you soon.